My name is Mark, and I haven't been very good at anything. My mother sometimes calls me a donkey. Well, it was kind of affectionate, although I understood that she meant that I was very stubborn. But I am what I am, and I can't do anything about my temperament, my character. However, one day, because of me, something happened to my mother. I disrupted her wedding, and it was terrible. Son, please help me move the chest of drawers. Okay, Dad, I'm coming. And you can imagine Benji was so shocked that he hadn't spoken to his father in 2 weeks. Well, gee, I would also be upset if I found out that I was adopted, or that my father or I were not related. It must be frustrating to find out that you don't know who you really are. Mark, man, are you serious? My aunt adopted Priscilla at a conscious age, and my sister was only too happy to escape from a hell of a place like her boarding school. Do you know how many months she screamed in her sleep? Her poor aunt has calmed her down somehow, and Priscilla has been much better lately, although she sometimes remembers the past. And what are you talking about? Yes, to the fact, man, that adopted children should only be grateful to the people who gave them a home, a family, that they were much more lucky than others. Maybe you're right, and what are you going to do with our friend? We need to meet and talk, maybe tomorrow. Okay, alright, see you in a while. If I was dying at this time, I would have died long ago. I'm sorry, Dad, it's just that our friend has had something going on and Justin and I were trying to figure out how to help him. And what happened to Benji? He found out that his parents were adopted, and he's kind of in shock. The parents looked at each other nervously, and then my mother asked, "What's the big deal? He should have been happy that he stayed in the orphanage." You sound just like Justin, but I can't imagine myself in his place. It would probably be very bad for me. That's it. It's time for lunch. Go wash your hands. The next day, Justin and I went to see Benji together. His condition was, let's say, not very good. The parents opened the door and said that their son did not want to talk to them. Maybe it's not so bad. I think your parents did something nice to you. Do you need it now? My Priscilla is a prime example of how happy she is to be in foster care. I didn't expect you to understand. Only an orphan like me can understand. Don't be selfish. You really don't need anything. Would it be better if you lived in a boarding school? Sharing a piece of bread and sleeping on the floor? Would you be flogged for bad behaviour? Are you here to support me or to protect my parents? I just need some time, okay? I haven't digested the thought yet. Alright, we'll leave you in silence. As soon as you get your thoughts together, you're welcome. We're waiting for you and Justin at our place. Honey, are you home? You sit down to dinner. We have news for you. And what is it? My mother and I decided to get married. Very funny, yeah? Your dad and I didn't have a wedding. We just lived together for many years. But I would still like a beautiful ceremony. I will be happy if you take an active part and lead me down the aisle. Mum, are you serious? Quiet, son, quiet. Well, since it's already been decided then, it's been a long time since I've been to a wedding, and it's definitely my parents' wedding. Not every teenager gets that chance, right? Soon preparations for the wedding began. Ordering a flower cake. We have a large garden at the back of the house, so we decided to hold the ceremony there. About a day before the event, when I was trying on a suit, I couldn't find a bow tie for a long time. I looked for it wherever I could, and my mother told me to look in the button locker. While I was taking it out, a box of documents fell out. I quickly scanned what was inside, and my hands trembled. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I began to choke. I quickly put everything back in place and went to the room. Son, is everything okay? Yes, Dad, it's fine. It's just a tough day tomorrow. I also dreamed of it, but don't tell your mother. Dad, do you remember how I was born? The father coughed a little, then straightened up and said, Of course, son. It was the happiest day of my life. Do you remember when your mother told you that she was pregnant with me? And what? No, nothing. I'll go and find the bow tie. That night, I was beside myself. I was terribly sad inside. I barely fell asleep. In the morning, and the next day, my mother woke me up early. I got up, got dressed, and the guests were already arriving. Everyone was congratulating my parents and me, and I was choking on what I'd learned. Son, is everything all right? You look weird. Yes, Mum, it's okay. Mum, why didn't you get married earlier? Well, it just happened. We had other concerns. We were very much waiting for you to be born as soon as possible, and there was no time for that, and so we decided. And what? Oh, okay, no, I was just asking. Well then, it's time for the ceremony. I took my mother by the arm and led her to the solemn wedding march, to the altar, where my father stood. He looked at my mother with such love and devotion, and there was a fire burning inside me. And when I gave him my mother's hand, they stood in front of the priest and he began to preach that the main thing in the family is sincerity and trust. I felt like I was starting to explode. "Dad, I'm not your son," I shouted, as if I exhaled. All the guests turned to me, including my parents. They looked at me with surprise and shock, and I stood there like a fool. Then I ran over to my mum and dad. "Dad, you should... I found the documents. They say that my biological father is a different person. I can't keep it quiet, it's not fair." My mother burst into tears, and the guests began to whisper. My father invited the musicians to play music, the guests to sit down at the table and eat, and he took my mother and I by the hand and led us away. The wedding was very disrupted. I know. What? In what sense? I can't have children, and it was I who suggested that your mother have IVF so that we could have a baby. It cost a lot of money, so we didn't get married before. I don't care who your blood father is. What's more important is that I feel like your real father. You are my son, and I love you. At that moment, I felt so ashamed in front of my parents. My mother. I insulted her in public, in front of everyone. I was so ashamed that I didn't know what to do. I begged to be forgiven, and somehow the ceremony went on. The guests were told it was a joke. After the wedding, my parents told me more about what happened, and I realised really how stupid I was. The rumours were still going around for a while, but then it passed. Tell me, did you guys like my story? Write your opinion about it in the comments below. Do not forget to put the likes, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel.
Hi, I'm Holly. I'm 17 years old, and I recently found out my father's terrible secret. He has to pay me not to tell my mother anything. Want to know what's in there? Watch on, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. My father's name is Marcus, and my mother's name is Leah. My parents and I live in Chicago, and I was born and raised there. My father and mother worked. My father worked in a construction site, and my mother was a school teacher. My parents got married when they were very young. As my mother says, for great love. They were still students when I was born. Then my dad was actively looking for work and got a job at a construction company. In principle, the money they both earned was enough for us. Only one thing was missing for complete happiness. Another child. My parents dreamed of having another baby boy or girl. My mother wanted to babysit a small child to carry it out, and my father also wanted it. Since I had grown up a long time ago, I didn't mind, especially since I could see how much they needed it. Only here all attempts were unsuccessful. Something was wrong with their health. In short, it took years. And when my parents, after numerous medical procedures, decided to adopt, they did it. Mom got pregnant. As I remember now, we celebrated this news so much. I saw my mother and father's eyes light up with happiness. It was beautiful. Because of the long-awaited pregnancy, my mother, having learned the news about the situation, immediately left work. My father promised that he would be able to provide for the whole family, and my mother devoted herself to taking care of herself. She then had a short period of time, about 2 to 3 months, and I began to notice that my dad became very busy. At dinner, he withdrew into himself, almost all the time, silent. He left for work without a mood and came the same way. To our questions, he said that everything was fine and everything was without details. I didn't want to get into his business, but my dad was getting too secretive. It wasn't like him. So, I decided to follow him. In the morning, as usual, he had breakfast and was about to leave, and I asked for a ride to school. I couldn't get a word out of him on the way either. When we said goodbye, he drove on, and I got into my friend's car, having agreed in advance, and we went after my father. It's a good thing he didn't know Jerry's car. I saw that my father had not gone to work, but to the coffee shop. This made me more stressed than I thought. Is he cheating on Mom? What is he anyway? I'm going to scratch his face all over! I began to yell, but Jerry calmed me down and asked me to sit in the car and watch in silence. So we sat for an hour, 2, 4. My father occasionally went to the toilet, but all the time he was holding a newspaper, drinking tea, and calling someone. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen him do. So the whole day passed, and when it hit 6 o'clock, he packed up and went home. That's all. What about work? I thought. In the evening, after dinner, I approached him with questions. When I honestly admitted to Dad that I was following him, he was freaking out. I became indignant. Like, what the hell is going on? My mother came into the bedroom at my loud voice. I wanted to tell her what I'd seen today, but my dad shoved me out the door and shoved a couple of bucks into my hand, motioning me to shut up. I left the room and went to my room. Half an hour later, my father came to me and whispered that we would talk in the morning. The next morning, when he was driving me to school, he told me that he had recently lost his job. He didn't want to tell my mother about this, so as not to upset her because she's pregnant. And then there's this. I don't know how to live now, but I'm looking for a job. I call ads all day, he said, but I was against this approach. I told my father that I didn't like the idea. I told him I didn't know when he would find a new job. On the contrary, it is better for a pregnant mother to know what to be prepared for, so that there are no unwanted surprises. But my father didn't agree. Before I went out, he gave me another couple of dollars to keep me quiet. I didn't want to take the money, but I had to pay for some benefits at school. I didn't tell my parents about it, so the money was just right. As the days passed, we were still living with secrets, while my mother's tummy grew bigger and bigger, and Dad left every morning to look for work. I helped him distribute his resume, and one day, when my father was supposedly at work, an unknown number called our house. Mom picked up the phone, and they said they were calling about Dad's resume. Hell, we forgot to delete our home phone number. From here, my mother found out the whole truth. I called my dad, he came home, and my mom was furious. My father was terribly ashamed in front of my mother because they would soon have a child, and there was no work. This was terrible. When at last she let out all her emotions and came to her senses, the three of us sat down and talked peacefully. I suggested that we all look for work together. This way we have a better chance of finding it faster. My mother, sitting at home, took a quick SMM course and started working online, and I mixed my father's resume on various platforms. But no matter how much they wanted to, the job was not found quickly. Probably 2 months passed. By that time, my father was pretty nervous. He was ready to go anywhere, even as a cleaner in a cafe. But I told him that I would soon have a vacation and I would work as a waitress. I didn't lose my positivity so as not to upset my parents, who were so upset. Well, then the help came somehow itself. My friend Jerry came to our house one day out of breath. He gave me the good news that a friend of his father's was looking for a superintendent in quick order, and Jerry immediately thought of my father. Dad immediately went to the interview and passed it successfully. That day we celebrated this event. For our family, it was a real occasion. My father went to work the next day, and my mother's heart calmed down. Since then, we have agreed not to hide this kind of thing from each other, because we are a family to overcome difficulties together. I invited Jerry over for dinner, and we thanked him for his help. Since then, we have been discussing our future plans more often. Well, after another 3 months in our family, there was a long-awaited addition. I had a little sister. We called her Hope, because hope is what guides us through the worst days. We must not forget about it, as well as the power of family support.